My name is Jen Gibson. I am a candidate for South Carolina House District 99, and we host weekly chats about issues that are important to all South Carolinians. So today we are joined by Brian Kaspryzyk. Did I say that right? Yes, sorry. I practiced so many times. And he is going to be discussing redistricting and gerrymandering, and his organization Fair Maps, and what they're doing to really help solve this issue on Facebook. So Brian asked me a really great question when we first started talking about this, and he asked me what the most important issue was in South Carolina, and I said education, and he said you're wrong. And why was I wrong?
because gerrymandering is more important, believe it or not. And the reason is because gerrymandering affects everything else. All the issues depend upon the people who are in the legislature. They're the ones that make the decisions about the air we breathe and the taxes we pay and so forth. And unless we fix the gerrymandering problem, your education issue is not going to be resolved. It's just not going to be resolved at all.
Okay, well, you sold me. So you have a great presentation that I'm going to pull up, and we can go through it and kind of explain to people what gerrymandering is, why redistricting is so important, and we'll go from there. And folks can jump on and ask questions in the comments, and I'll pass them on to Brian. So great, here we go. We are, let's see here, where is the, okay, I had it all set up. See here, it went away when I had my problems. Okay, so we will go right here. Okay. Okay, and here we are. And we are on the first screen. Well, we should be on the first screen. Let's see here. We'll hope it goes up. Let's see here. We should be sharing our screen right now. And yes, here we go. It is up. So we can go on ahead and get started. Brian, if you want to take us through.
The fox in the hen house, gerrymandering is, the fox in the hen house is basically a metaphor for what gerrymandering is. And the fox refers to the state legislators, the senators and the House members. And the hen house is the redistricting process that takes place every 10 years, where basically the legislators design and manipulate the district lines to make sure that they get reelected. So they always, if you've noticed, the same old candidates get elected and reelected over and over again, and it's because they redesign the district lines to make sure that happens.
Yeah, and I think that's why we get districts that, you know, my dog looks like one of those little Scottish Terrier dogs. It's got a head and a tail and little legs that come down. It crosses 2 counties, 4 mayors. You know, it's really difficult to create great public policy for your constituents when you're so spread out. So great. That is an excellent graphic.
It's so easy to do now with modern data collection. They can manipulate the lines down to the neighborhood level, down to the street level.
Mm-hmm. They really can. Yeah. So. Awesome. Okay. Well, moving on. This is a great example of where the word even came from, because it's kind of a funny word.
This demonstrates what gerrymandering is probably better than anything that I can say. Back in 1812, Governor Elbridge Gerry was the governor of Massachusetts, my home state, by the way. And he was worried that his party was going to lose control of the Massachusetts Senate. So what he did is redesign the district boundaries to create what looked like, at least at the time, like a salamander. So gerrymander is where the word came from, but you can just look at this map and you can see what gerrymandering is all about.
Oh yeah, I mean, we have some congressional districts that look like that. So yeah, it's a very scary looking salamander from the
Looks like a
1800s.
dragon, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah, and so that's where the word comes from. And we hear a lot about redistricting. We have the conversations about redistricting. They're really talking about the same thing, drawing of districts in a way that's fair and not necessarily a benefit to the person running for office. So
Yeah.
redistricting and gerrymandering are I guess, really almost the same thing.
Well, the Constitution requires that the states conduct and the country conduct a census every 10 years, and that's what's happening this year.
Mhm.
And the purpose of that is because populations change. Some states gain population, some states and districts lose population, so they've got to redesign the district lines, and so that's what happens. So in 2022, that's when they're going to be redesign the lines here in South Carolina as well as other states.
Great. So Joe Shelley made a great comment on Facebook. He said gerrymandering has been a problem for years and it's ridiculous that it is allowed to happen. So I would agree. So that's a good comment, Joe. All right, great. So let's moving on to the next slide. You mentioned the census, and here's what happened in 2010 after that census.
Yeah, we gained population. People from up north, like myself, are moved down south, and we used to have 6 congressional districts, and now we have 7.
Yeah, awesome. What do you think is going to happen after this next census?
I think we're going to have an 8th district.
I agree. Yeah. So, and that means that another state will lose a seat, right? Because it's been fixed for a while, the House of Representatives. Okay.
That's correct. Yep.
Awesome. Okay. And so this slide is about the line determines who votes where. Got a great graphic here.
Yeah, the voters decide who represents them, and the representatives make the laws that govern our states and our country, affecting the air we breathe, the food we eat, and the taxes we pay. But next slide, Jen.
Okay.
But unfortunately, despite how significant this is, the process happens behind closed doors. I mean, literally, it happens behind closed doors. And in this state, as in most states, it's the Senate and the House who get together and they redesign the lines, basically out of sight, nobody kind of can see what they're doing because it's behind closed doors.
Yeah, and it's just right. It's just the elected representatives that decide, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And what was it, 10 years ago, the House, one of their guidelines that the House had for redistricting was to protect incumbents. I mean, they actually had the arrogance to put that in writing and say, one of our criteria is to protect the incumbents, whether they're Democrats or Republicans.
Yeah, and I could see how that would really affect, like, it just has a cascading effect to every other piece of legislation. Yeah. So Joe Shelley just chimed in again and said that he thinks your presentation is great and he wished more people understood the importance of this issue. So that's awesome. All right, and a great graphic of all of the computers. I am amazed at the data as a candidate that I have access to about how people vote, where they vote. A lot of that information is out there.
Yep, you know better than I do. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, and this series of graphics is great because I think it really breaks down how you draw a line and why it matters and what it looks like.
Yeah, well, currently Republicans control the congressional delegation in South Carolina, but while the breakdown of voters is about 55% Republican and 45% Democrat, yet Republicans control 5 of the 7 congressional seats, and until recently it was 6 out of the 7.
Yeah, I mean that's really unbelievable. We hear so often that South Carolina is a red state, and you could never have upsets here. But I think we can see here that we're actually not that far apart, and there are a lot of independents in South Carolina, and so gerrymandering has really pushed this state and divided it and really created this political divide that that's unnatural. It's not really there, right?
Yeah, this is, you know, this happens in other states too. In
Mhm.
this particular state, the redistricting is controlled mostly by Republicans because it's mostly a Republican state. But remember, it's also designed to protect incumbents too, especially in the state legislature. But statewide, I mean, we've had Jim Clybourne's district. He's a Democrat. His district is gerrymandered. If you've ever seen a picture of his map, it's just crazy. You look at it's curlicued. And I think it was 20 or 30 years ago is when his district was created. It was a black district. You know, it was where all of the many of the black folks were put into his district to make sure he got elected at the time. And every year, every 2 years thereafter, for the last 20 or 30 years, he's gotten reelected. Well, that's fine. It's nice to have equal representation, but the problem is because of that, other African Americans throughout the state did not have a chance to even to run because his district was so packed with African Americans. It just made it unfair for the average person of color to get elected here in South Carolina because of that. In our legislature, I've talked to our legislators many times, and they always point that out to me. Well, we have a black candidate, we've always had one. Well, that's no excuse for basically cutting out other black candidates throughout the state. It's just the wrong thing to do. Jim could get elected in a white district in this state anyway, so.
Well, Congressman Clyburn is amazing, and I'm sure that whatever his district looked like, he would win re-election. So
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
and yeah, but we would like to see those be drawn in a way that makes more sense geographically and is more representative for sure.
Mhm.
All right, so cracking and packing, I love this, and we have a teacher, Charlie, on that says when she teaches this about gerrymandering in her class, she separates the groups and kind of actually does it with her students. She gerrymanders her students, and when they realize that their vote has been diminished, they really get it. So let's talk about cracking and packing.
That's interesting to me because I remember my American history class back in my sophomore year in high school, and they teach gerrymandering. That's part of the curriculum that all Americans learn about this, but it's a relatively little piece of our history, and we don't really think about it except every 10 years. So it's easy to forget. But anyway, let me talk about this because this kind of explains what this is all about more than anything else. This particular diagram is perfect representation, which we have here 20 red dots and 30 blue dots. We have 2 red districts and 3 blue districts. That's perfect representation. But the next diagram is also the same representation of dots. There's also 20 red dots, 30 blue dots, but as you can see, they're compact, but they're divided differently and they're unfair. In this case, it creates 0 red districts and 5 blue districts. And the next one is neither compact nor fair, and it creates 3 red districts and 2 blue districts. So you can kind of get the idea of how easy it is to manipulate the lines to create whatever you want to create.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, same numbers, but totally different outcome. And I think the goal should be, when we talk about transparency and honesty in government, is that, people should be represented fairly, that it should be an accurate representation. No one group should have an advantage over the other.
Yep. And there's 2 ways to protect incumbents: to increase the number of voters from his district, of course, but also to draw the opponent out of the district, which, believe it or not, that really happens.
It's funny for political insiders, they're all saying that if they're watching this, they're going, and we all know a couple of examples of this where someone was, a line was changed literally because of a person that lived in the district, and they just
Can
them
you
right
believe
out.
it? I mean, that's amazing. That's just,
Yeah, I think that's where that Fox in the Hen House graphic comes from.
God.
Okay.
Okay,
This is what's amazing to me. This slide, this whole discussion is what was really amazing to me. I was the first person to run in a general election in over 20 years in my seat. The woman running for state senate, same thing, over 20 years since someone has even challenged her opponent.
Yeah, and this map shows that 70% of the state house races in 2016 had only one candidate on the ballot. And the districts in yellow that you see there was at least two candidates on the ballot. But 70% of the races had only one candidate. Now, what kind of democracy is this? This is not democracy at all.
Yeah, I agree.
Crazy.
All right.
Okay, this is a map which shows all of the House districts, and the districts in yellow are districts where the winning candidate got between 51 and 56% of the vote. In other words, it was a competitive race. It was a close race. On the other extreme, the vast majority in the districts in the gray, the winning candidate got 97% or more of the vote. Obviously, in most of those cases, there was only one candidate on the ballot. Again, what kind of democracy is this? There's one state that changed, that reformed their redistricting process. And one of the criteria that they use to create districts is based upon making them competitive, so that you had an equal chance, but also so that the issues could be brought out. Now think about these gray districts. In those districts, there were only one candidate for the most part on the ballot. What kind of debate took place in those districts? There was no debate.
You know, even though I challenged my opponent in 2018, she refused to debate me, and she got away with it. She did not have to have a debate about, you know, our visions for where we would go with this state. And, you know, the district was so stacked that it didn't matter. I mean, I just, you know, in a different world, I would have thought if somebody refused to debate that they would pay a price for it at the polls. And the reality is that she didn't.
And because of that, there's no accountability.
Yeah.
There's just no accountability. That a person can just get reelected just because they showed up, or in your case, there was not even debates. I mean, how can people decide who to vote for? How can there be a normal discussion of the issues if there's only one candidate on the ballot? And is this democracy? I think not.
Yeah, it really reinforces the idea that you vote based on your party ideology, which some people do, and that's their right. And I mean, I do that a lot, to be honest with you. But voters should have choices. I mean, people should be able to consider themselves an independent and be able to evaluate on their own
Sure.
which candidate matches their vision for where the state should go. So, all right.
Okay, this is basically the same map, except this is the Senate.
Look at all this gray, y'all. These are 97% or higher, y'all. 97%. That is not democracy.
Yeah, crazy.
Okay, so you're from Horry County, and so you've done a lot of looking at Horry and Richland County, and I like it because it's kind of a look at legislative delegation. One is Republican, one is Democrat. It really illustrates how this is, you know, a nonpartisan issue that this happens. This is a issue with law and not an issue of politics, really.
Yeah, the next slide that you're going to put up there, Jen, is probably the most interesting one.
Then let's bring it up.
This is the Horry County Legislative Delegation. There are 5 senators and 10 House members. And if I can just refer you to the column on the far right, the second to the right, the general competition column, that tells us that of the 15 races in Horry County, which is primarily a Republican county, by the way, only one candidate, poor little Russell Fry, right on the bottom there, he had competition in the general election, but 14 out of 15 had no competition in the general election. And if you look to the column to the left of that, many of the candidates didn't even have competition in the primary election. And this is how it worked. And this again is Horry County, which is mostly a Republican county. But Jen, go to the next slide, which will show us Richland County. Richland County is primarily a Democratic controlled district. And in this case, there's 18 legislators, there's 5 senators and 13 House members. And again, let me refer you to the general competition column, the one on the far right, second to the right. And out of these 18, only 4 had competition in the general election. 14 out of the 18 did not have competition in the general election. Why? Because of redistricting, because of gerrymandering. This is not democracy. Again, I keep repeating myself here. It's not democracy.
It's a point worth repeating.
Yeah.
Oh, and I want to go back just to make a point, so that we can. Oh, hold on, I was not going to do that. Sorry. The money that was raised, all that money, and a lot of those races weren't even competitive.
No, it's not that. There was no other candidate.
There was no other candidate, like over $100,000 in some of those cases. That's part of what's wrong with our system, I think. So I just wanted to make that point. So I just skipped over your last slide. I'm so sorry. And I don't want to try to back up again because I think I'm going to advance again.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Okay.
This is an interesting one too. It shows us who voted in the 2016 South Carolina primary. And the big number there, of course, is the 3 million people that didn't even show up to vote.
Yeah.
260,000 voters showed up for the Republican primary, 158,000 showed up for the Democratic primary. And basically, if you refer back to the previous slides where there was only one candidate on the ballot, these folks, the 8.6% and 5.3% of voters in this state basically chose our legislators. And the saddest thing, of course, is that 3 million people just didn't even bother to vote. But you can't blame them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
does this really matter? Because it's already decided who's gonna win the election.
Yeah, I think that we've got to have choices, and we've got to have choices on a primary level. I think that we should have multiple people in every race. Lots of parties are not monoliths. People have different ideas and different visions. So yeah, I think that if people understood how important primaries are and how important it is that we have lots of folks. I don't love the idea of parties protecting incumbents or kind of the chosen one. So I always am really excited when I see multiple people running. We had 6 people run for this seat in the primary, and I was really excited about that because I feel like the people in this district had some choices.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, now what this one kind of tells us everything about gerrymandering and what it does and what it doesn't do. First of all, it ensures, like I've emphasized, that incumbents get reelected over and over and over again. But it also decreases voter turnout because why should I vote if there's only one candidate on the ballot? But also it reduces the number of candidates. If you're thinking of running for an office and you realize that the same old person keeps getting reelected over and over again, they raise a lot of money, and the money they raise goes to the next election, and then it moves to the next election. What are our chances of winning an election? So why bother? And because of gerrymandering, it promotes extreme positions. I mean, because people are elected without opposition, they can take any crazy position they want on any issue. And that results in less compromise too, because they don't have to compromise because they're basically not accountable to anybody. And they also don't learn how to compromise, because particularly in the state, when they eventually move up to Congress, you gotta compromise to get things done. And they don't, in the state anyway, they don't learn to compromise, which creates gridlock. Everybody knows about gridlock. Well, why do we have gridlock? Because of gerrymandering. That's what it is. And Lastly, it results in bad government. And the next slide, unless you have a question about this.
I don't think so. We'll see if
The
we have
next
any.
slide shows us, I think, what bad government is all about. This is South Carolina's ranking, and you guys can read this yourself. You can see it. We're last in so many different things, education in particular. We've had problems with education for 20 or 30 years, and we haven't been able to fix it. Well, why not? Well, because the people who get elected, their primary concern is to get reelected. Their primary concern is to get business for their business back home. So if there are representatives, people will go to their business and use them, and that's why they do it. Did you know that in South Carolina, they only work from January to May? Now think about that for a second, okay? It's basically a half-time, part-time job, and do you know what they get paid? They get paid $10,400 a year. Now, that's below the poverty level.
Yeah.
So why does this happen? It happens because the people who are elected, their motivation is not to make things better for the state. It's not to improve the health care in our state. It's not to reduce the crime. It's to get reelected and reelected so that their business or their interest can go forward. And we are stuck in this cycle of problems that go on and on and on. So.
Yeah, I mean, Charlie made a comment that running is cost prohibitive, the pay is awful. One of the things that I personally would like to see from the state legislature is that we expand the amount of time that they spend in session, and that the amount of money goes up. I know we have one representative in our county that works a full-time job, and so she, on days that they're in session, and she doesn't have another option. She has 5 kids and she's a single parent. So she has to have another way to make that income. And I mean, to me, she's one of the greatest examples of a servant leader because she does that. She's not self-employed. She doesn't have the ability just to kind of exist without a job, and she still makes that choice. So
I would propose something pretty radical, which most people are going to scoff at.
Well, let's hear it.
I would suggest that our legislators get paid about at least $75,000 a year, if not $100,000 a year, because they're the leaders of our state. These are the CEOs of our state. They deal with important matters that have to do, with the air we breathe, the food we eat, the taxes we pay, and we don't even pay them. We should pay them. We should pay them a lot of money so that when they go to Columbia, they can spend their entire full-time job working on these problems in our state. And the way it is now, $10,400 a year is, you have to have another job, obviously.
Yeah, it really creates a situation where only a few people can run for office. Like, you have to be in an elite class before you can even be considered. And
That's right.
I think we need a representative government. I think we all talk about that we need, folks from every part of South Carolina to represent South Carolina. So important issues and important perspectives don't get left off. So, yeah. And these are, startling statistics. 45th for women in legislature. That's only 5%. So I think is what we have, and you can't make laws for women without women. So that's just something I personally have a vested interest in. So what does a fair system look like?
Well, this tells us about the other states. Other states in like Alaska, Arizona, Idaho, and California have created independent commissions, citizens commissions, to draw the district lines. And in 2018, the states on the bottom, Colorado, Michigan, Missouri, Ohio, and Utah, they brought the issue before the statewide referendum. And in each of those states, they overwhelmingly approved the idea of creating an independent commission. The problem in South Carolina is we are not allowed to do citizens initiative petitions. We can't do it statewide. We can do it in the county level, but we can't. So it makes it a lot difficult to to create an independent commission.
So we kind of have to count on the legislature to make the commitment to make this happen.
Yes, but it's like, basically, it's like taking the power away from the legislature and putting it in the hands of citizens. And needless to say, that's not an easy job.
Yeah.
But that's our job. That's what we at Fair Maps are trying to do.
Yes. So this comes into your organization with Fair Maps and about redistricting. Tell us, I brought you on because you are y'all are not a partisan group. Your only issue is that you want fair redistricting.
Yes, and we've got some legislation. There's a piece of it's House Bill 3432 and Senate Bill 254, which calls for the creation of an independent redistricting commission with a randomly selected 14-member commission with 2 members from each of the congressional districts, 1 Republican and 1 Democrat, to kind of make it as fair as we can, selected at random from a pool of 8 candidates from each district, so that there's 8 candidates in each district, and they're selected at random. Their name is pulled out of a hat, basically, in an open application process by the Ethics Commission creates a process, an application process, where people have to apply to become members of the commission. Politicians, elected officials, and lobbyists and their families are ineligible, and that's, needless to say, is really important. Mm-hmm. And lastly, the final plan cannot be overturned by the governor or legislature. So that's the legislation that we're trying to get approved. But like I said, it's an uphill battle. It's taking power away from the legislators. And here's the bills. It's House Bill 3432 and S254. But if those of you who are listening to this, if you could call your senator and representative and ask them to support redistricting reform. And there's some other pieces of legislation out there, by the way, that is not identical to this, but we need redistricting reform in this state in one form or another. So.
Yeah, and that kind of comes back to, so I know a lot of folks say they support redistricting, but not all redistricting bills are created equal, are they?
No. In I think it's 37 of our states, the legislature is solely responsible for redistricting. And there's 10 states that have some form of citizens' participation in the process. And our bill, I think, is the most, will guarantee the most fair and non-political process to create the commission. I'll give you one interesting example. It's Missouri. I think it's Missouri. They just passed redistricting reform, and they had the redistricting done by a demographer. Okay, but there were commissions created, and the commission was created, and I forget. It was an equal number of Democrats and Republicans, and they were chosen at random. But anyway, the only way that they could change what the demographer did was if 70% of the commission voted against it, or voted to change it. Mm-hmm. So it was not citizens doing it themselves, but it was a demographer who was presumably not political. He was not chosen on the basis of politics. And I mean, so that's one example of how to do it. I'm not sure that's the best way. Mm-hmm. I think our way is the better way, but each of the 10 states that have done redistricting reform has some kind of variation to this. We base ours mostly on the California experience. They did that, what I just described for you, that's what they did. And it seemed to us that it was the most fair to make sure that the politicians were not involved in the process. So
yeah, so I think it's important, when you ask candidates, or do they support redistricting, to ask them specifically what objectives they see when they talk about redistricting, because I think it can be very different what it looks like. So
yeah,
and
after redistricting reform is passed in those legislators in those 10 states, the parties, mostly Republicans, by the way, try to dilute the legislation, and they try to change it, and they try to challenge it. So even after we get this legislation passed in South Carolina, it's probably still not going to be over with, because the legislators don't want to lose the power that they have to get reelected.
Mm-hmm. It's good to know. Yeah. And so let me plug your website. It's fairmapssc.com, and you have a petition there, correct, that people can sign?
That's right. It's like I said before, we are not allowed in South Carolina to do statewide initiative petitions, but we can do it on a county by county level. So that's what we're doing right now. We're concentrating right now on Richland County because we feel like we have the best chance of getting the 15% of signatures that we need. But this can be done in every one of our counties. Yeah, so just go to that fairmapssc.com, get a copy of the petition, sign it, and get your friends and relatives to sign it, and help the process.
Awesome. Okay. Well, that is the end of that. Let me stop sharing our screen, and I am going to ask some questions. Let's see here that we have that have come, and make some, share some of the comments, because we've had a lot of conversation going on. All right. So let's see here. Joe Shelley says that it makes it hard to have competitions because of the money. Primaries are where we truly elect, but most people don't think it's important. And I think that's that's important. Charlie would like to know if these slides are available for public use. She'd like to use them in her class.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Charlie would like to know if these slides are available for public use. She would like to use them in her classroom. She's a public school teacher.
Yes, absolutely.
I will connect y'all. I will connect y'all.
Yeah, just connect. Yeah, I can email it to you. Yes.
Yeah, and Charlie made a comment that the pay is a barrier for entry for regular folks like her. And she's a teacher. She's an educator, and her voice would certainly be really important to have in the legislature. But it's just cost prohibitive. She doesn't feel like she can run and serve because of job schedules and things like that.
Yeah, we have a slide presentation that I've been giving throughout mostly my county here in Horry County. And the slides we saw today were cut down. I think I have about 30 slides altogether. And I've been going to different groups and giving them presentations, and everybody understands the concept. The concept of gerrymandering is really not that complicated at all. Mm-hmm. The problem is obvious, and the solution is clear. So, but it's a tough issue to talk to people about, because it's relatively academic. Mm-hmm. You kind of have to think through it, and so many people are so disillusioned about our government. That's why voter participation in our state is extremely low, because you can't blame people for not showing up, because their vote doesn't really count. So for those reasons, it's tough to get people involved in this issue. It's tough to get people to sign well, it's really easy to get them to sign the petition, okay? But to actually work at it and to get the number of signatures that we need, it's just activists are working on many, many different issues. Mm-hmm. And gerrymandering doesn't happen to be on the top of the list, unfortunately. And as I said at the beginning, gerrymandering is the #1 important issue in South Carolina. It's more important than education, Jan, sorry. It's more important than domestic violence or global warming or gun violence or anything. It's just more important.
Yeah, I don't know that we can have meaningful conversations and debate and compromise on any of these topics if we don't have fair representation in our legislature. Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. Joe Shelley said he would also like to see that businesses would be required to allow people to serve without a loss of a job. Yeah, that's a place where private industry can come in and, you know, help make it easier for people to run.
Mhm.
And Joe is very involved in his union, and he has been working to get that in the union contract, that employees would be able to take time off to be a legislature. You know, we need those servant leaders.
Mhm.
And Joe wants me to email him some more information. So you got it. I will, definitely. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I think that's all of our questions. And Brian, thank you so much. You've really helped kind of educate us. And this is a great resource that will live on the page that people can use, and we'll send out to folks to watch. And I know you're available for questions and to give this presentation to other organizations.
Yeah, put my email address out there, Jen, and
I will.
I'll be glad to answer any questions that anybody has, or to help them to get a gerrymandering project in their community going. So
thank you so much for joining us this week. We appreciate you being here and shedding so much information on this topic. And we'll have to chat again. Hopefully we'll have good news.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Bye-bye.